What's up, y'all? Y'all are listening to Living Corporate's flagship podcast. If you didn't know, Living Corporate helps organizations build employee engagement and market trust through data analytics and data transformation, our e-learning platform, and brand marketing storytelling. We're so excited for you to be here today. The conversation you're about to hear is going to connect the dots between employee experience and go-to-market effectiveness. If you're not ready, get ready. Here we go. Bowman. What's up, man? How you doing?
I'm alive and well and highly favored. Yes.
Hey, man. That's what you like to hear, and I feel the same way. You know, look, when I became aware of you through the context of Reframe Inc. and the fact that that is your organization, that's your company, you're a founder, you're an entrepreneur. We all have a moment that kind of like, well, let me not say we all have. I know for me, I have had a moment and then like a series of smaller moments, been like big moments where I was like, all right, it's time for me to, I gotta go.
Right.
What moment was that for you?
Yeah, thank you for having me and taking the time in terms of living corporate. I think, your question in itself, I can describe it as, early on in my career. I started my career out at Pepsi. And it was my first job out of business school, undergrad rather. I went to South Carolina State University and HBCU. And I was entering like year 4. And, a lot of people, when they ask me, early in my career, it's like Pepsi. It's like, oh, where are you in purchase? We're in New York. It says, no, I was in the field. I started on the back of a Pepsi truck. And I manage about 14 routes. And so you think about that, it gave me experience across every class of trade from a retail perspective. And so I was looking for the next way to elevate. And a young lady named Candy Walls, who I am still in contact with today, was going around the country doing installations of a handheld piece of technology. Because everything prior to that, dated, was very old technology. And so I was on that implementation team, and she had worked with me over the course of 6 months. She said, hey, have you ever thought about business school? It's time for you to get out of there, get out of here. And I was like, what do you mean? I'm doing great. I'm 26, 27, balling, running a whole distribution center. I was in Augusta, Georgia. And so she challenged me to look beyond and aim higher. And so it was right at that moment that I began to get a better understanding of her background, what is business school, pros and cons. And immediately I began to pursue the path of getting my MBA and eventually graduated from Clark Atlanta University with my master's of business. So that was a pivotal moment. One, in terms of getting an entry into Pepsi, and the other one was making a decision of pivoting, aiming higher in terms of going after my MBA.
Shifting my wardrobe from summer to fall is always a challenge. Luckily, Quince offers timeless and high-quality items I adore, ensuring my wardrobe stays fresh and I don't blow my budget. Like cashmere sweaters from $50, pants for every occasion, washable silk tops, and so much more. The best part, all Quince items are priced 50 to 80% less than similar brands. By partnering directly with top factories, Quince cuts the cost of the middleman and passes on the savings to us. And Quince only works with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing practices and premium fabrics and finishes. I love that. Listen, I really have enjoyed the cashmere sweaters I've gotten, as well as a pair of pants, and I'm going to tell you, they are matched right with all the quality of the other things that I've purchased. It's been great. Make switching seasons a breeze with Quince's high-quality closet essentials. Go to quince.com/corp for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's QUINCE.com/corp to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/corp. Listen, y'all, growing up, my mom was always like, you need to learn another language. For a little while, I was picking up Spanish, but you know what they say, if you don't use it, you lose it. Well, time has gone on, and I still don't know Spanish like I need to, but thankfully, I got Rosetta Stone. Listen, if you didn't know, Rosetta Stone is a trusted expert for 30 years with millions of users and 25 languages off. They have fast language acquisition. There's no English translation, so you really learn how to speak, listen, and think in that language. Intuitive process so you can pick up a language naturally, fast with words, then phrases, then sentences. And it's designed for long-term retention. As speech recognition, there's built-in true accent feature gives you feedback on your pronunciation. It's like having a personal trainer for your accent. It's convenient, flexible learning, anytime, anywhere. Learn on the go with the mobile app or at your desktop on your schedule. And it's amazing value. Lifetime membership has all 25 languages for any and all trips and language needs in life. That's lifetime access to 25 language courses Rosetta Stone offers for 50% off. A steal. So don't put off learning that language. There's no better time than right now to get started. Living Corporate listeners can get Rosetta Stone's lifetime membership for 50% off. Visit rosettastone.com/today. That's 50% off unlimited access to 25 language courses for the rest of your life. Redeem your 50% off rosettastone.com/today today. You know, I ask because I think for me and for a lot of folks I talk to, typically that pivot into like entrepreneurship is something that's kind of like negative, right?
Yeah.
Like your boss be on some bullshit. You're like, you know what? Let me just go get up out of here. You know what I'm saying? I'm going to tell you mine real fast since we here, Jeffrey. You know, this was only last year. So, you know, I'm at this job and it started off really great, right? I was kind of positioned as, oh, you're going to be the next in line to take over the company, blah, blah, blah. We're going to, you know, put you in position. You're like my successor, talking to the person who's the CEO. And I was like, cool. But y'all know I got this other business, right? Living Corporate was right there. I was still doing Living Corporate on the side. And I told him I'm not about to stop. And so, you know, time goes on. I realize, okay, this is way more dysfunctional than I was advertised. Oh, okay, this person not really in charge like I thought. And then one day, Jeffrey, like I was told, hey, we're going to hire somebody and we're going to hire somebody who wants you to help put their job description together and put their comp package together. I was like, oh, okay, cool, no problem. And so put the whole thing together for them. And when they get hired, though, when they describe their job, Jeffrey, it sounds like my job. And I said, well, that's not what we had talked about, right? And then like around the same time that I was looking at them funny for doing that, Living Corporate closed a huge account. And I was like, oh, well, time to go. I had to hit them with the Kevin Gates. I had to go. I had to get up out of there. I was out of there. I left, right? And I think like so often it's like when I talk to people who look like me, like it's typically something like that. It's something, you know, mine was much less emotional.
Yeah. Because you've been building it.
Than it probably could have been because I've been building it. Right. But what I like about how you're sharing your story is it doesn't really sound like it was anything necessarily traumatic or disrespectful. It was more of someone came alongside you, gave you some game. Yeah. And then you decided just to elevate, to do something different. You know, as you think about your current role, CEO and founder of Reframe Inc., I think we also have moments where like, okay, how real is this thing that I'm doing? Right? Like, yo, like, okay, yep, I'm going to try, but I'm going to give it like a year. I'm going to give it like 2 years. At what point did you realize, like, wait, no, I'm going to be able to do this, and like, this is now what I do?
So I gave you a short version. That was, I consider that was probably the ending of chapter 1 career-wise. And I think I've had 3 chapters. And, the thing I want to communicate and articulate, I think there's a generation of people in the workplace, whether they're entrepreneurs or they work or building someone else's dream, that I think it's had the luxury of conceiving the idea that I could actually start something. And so the reason I say that, I like to say, I know I look young, but first to graduate from college in my family. And so I say that to say that a lot of us that graduated, I call it post Generation 3, post civil rights, maybe had the inkling or the idea of it, but for a lot of us that didn't come up in an environment where entrepreneurship was encouraged, you had to choose a safety mechanism, and that was actually going into corporate. Now, for me, I was always an entrepreneur. I had 3 jobs in high school. I drove a school bus, worked at Kenny Shoes, and worked at Little Caesars Pizza. So I always had money in my pocket. And so for me, going into corporate right out of undergrad was security, because there was no one else to catch me. I couldn't even move back home because I shared a room with my mom. So there was no exit. And that's exit plan to catch you if you fell. And so with that, it wasn't until the 90s, I went back to business school in 1996 to 98. And a lot of people think, and it was in Atlanta, the ATL, Freaknik, Olympics, culture, music. It was about to explode. But what a lot of people also knew at that particular time, that was the really beginning of the internet. And so for a lot of people that went back to school, to business school specifically, I had 23 job offers coming out of business school. Now, why? I was a hustler. 2,
because you him.
I am him. and the other piece behind it is that because a lot of us chose brand management, marketing, there was this little thing happening in San Francisco, Silicon Valley. They were not recruiting at the schools that I went to. They were building the ecosystem at that particular time for the Harvards, the Stanfords, the Northwest.
They was laying the exclusivity down early.
Now, I went to Procter & Gamble as an intern, great internship. But our overall summer project was, why should Procter & Gamble invest in this little known thing called the internet? And so that was really my first exposure. Now, I was a techie. I had a Commodore VIC-20, Commodore 64. I had no idea where my mother got the money from. No idea, right? Think about that. But that exposed me as to what risk or perceived risk people were taking outside of securing a brand management or a consulting gig, which most people get. And so with that, I still couldn't leave because guess what? I had student loans, right? But what I did do is I took that idea of the internet and the idea of direct home delivery, direct store delivery, which I was at Pepsi, products delivered on the truck. We call that direct store delivery. Now, prior to the invention of direct store delivery, where did people get their products delivered? To the home, right?
Yeah.
Now, with the invention of the internet, people now have a mechanism for commerce and exchange on what we now call the platform. And so I had the foresight. So I started a company called iBaguette in 1998 that essentially was the makings of Amazon. I studied Amazon, 10K reports. Now, at that particular time, I was building a direct home delivery service where I had grocery background, right? I delivered product.
Yeah.
So for me, the mechanism of the internet was at some point, they're going to want the sodas delivered from the store to the home. They're going to want all these other things. Now, the unfortunate part, that was in 1998. So I built my startup plan and went back and forth between Milwaukee because I went and worked in brand management at Miller Brewing Company. And I was pitching iBagit at the time, Amazon, Webvan, Peapod, Home Grocer. Now, this is way before Obama came in and passed the laws from an investment standpoint. That was a gift.
Yeah.
Right? So I'm out trying to raise money. These guys were raising $1 billion to build their service offering because it had to be subsidized.
Yeah.
And so I went all the way. I raised $25,000. Peanuts. The access wasn't there. There was no venture capital access. I didn't know who to call. There was no Blacks in Tech. There was none of that.
Right.
And so I say that to say there's a generation of people that were started their careers in the early 2000s after the laws changed that gave them access to capital. But I had to go back. I was working day and night. I had to go back in, went to corporate strategy, then went to Dell, and then the market shifted and changed after the laws was passed. But by then, you missed the infrastructure development like we have right now in terms of artificial intelligence. So now you have to create an enterprise on top of the infrastructure, which is great, right?
But it's not the same.
It's you think about Sam Altman, he's going to be probably our first trillionaire because they're laying the infrastructure down. And so I took that and I did a lot of digitalization development. I went into the transformation business. In chapter 2 of my career, as the internet matured, as digital matured, I was literally on the forefront. I ran econometric modeling for Dell. And for most people don't know what that is, that's math marketing. That's the way that everything else is measured in terms of calls and clicks and response from a performance standpoint. I was on the forefront of that, then went to Sears and led their digitalization efforts. And they wanted to be like Amazon, right? At that particular time, they were on, in their last chapters. But all of those learnings I developed early on, but still cannot jump out, right? And so it wasn't until I went to Ogilvy after leaving Sears where I got the question of a lifetime. And the question was, if David Ogilvy were here, what would the agency look like? And so for me, getting that question was a full circle moment because in the positions that I had the luxury of awarding contracts, managing agencies, service providers. And so I understood the inequity associated with the practice of general market and multicultural marketing and the inequity in practice of talent, human resources, and DE&I. And so that question gave me a framework, a foundation that said, here's an opportunity for make significant impact and write a new playbook in terms of how do you transform organizations for the new majority. And that's where at Ogilvy, I got the chance to write a thought leadership piece, go out and develop a framework, go out with actual clients and test and learn that framework, and then go out and see if it worked. So I became much more of an entrepreneur in the professional services organization, and that exploded because I brought the learnings and the teachings that I learned in corporate, the entrepreneurial framework, working for professional service companies because it's based on hours, contracts, right? Which a lot of us don't get experience in terms of you can write a check and you can learn how to ask for a check. And oftentimes when you're in corporate, you know how to write that check, but you don't know how to ask for that check. And when you make that crossover from, building someone else's dream to building your dream, you got to learn how to ask for a check. And so that's why I say that was a journey that got me into a position to where I could start Reframe. And after I built the industry's first inclusive customer experience design practice at Ogilvy Culture, that gave me the as someone told me, sometimes when you are an entrepreneur, especially when you are first generation or even second generation, you got to pad your landing because you're going to fall. And so as much of a buffer like you had when you left, it makes the journey that much more higher probability that you're going to be in business more than 1 year. That's the long version.
100%. No, it's a great version, and I appreciate the context, right? Because so much of, your story is so interesting because it resonates with mine, right? When I think about Living Corporate has been around since 2018, but what was interesting about it grew and matured as I grew and matured. Because I'm not the same person I was in 2018, right? I was a consultant at Accenture. So while I'm learning about, to your point, how contracts work and how to reply to pitch decks and how to put things together, proposals and things of that nature, I'm stocking that away just as me as a professional. Then I'm going on and I'm building like analytics solutions and and because I'm in a professional services context. So like I think it's really hard to oversell how much a professional services background can help in your entrepreneurial journey, because you have to basically be an entrepreneur already, especially for Black folks. The Black folks at the Ogilvies and the Accentures and the PwCs of the world, the Capgems of the world, we don't have our own like book of business to handle. We got to go out and we work for a partner, and then we have to, we grow. We have to. It's just it's really a hustle, right? I think, and so when you come from that and you're learning, okay, well, here's what customer success looks like, and here's, again, to your point, how to ask for a check, how to scope things and make sure that you understand cost and margin and all those different things in a really tangible way, beyond what I believe, and no shade to business school, but beyond what business school can teach you, right? Because so often people go to business school and they go where, Jeffrey? To consulting, to your earlier point. So having that professional service consultative exposure and experience, I believe, tremendously helped me. And being able to kind of build products and things internally at different places and really kind of test them out and see where, because there's and to see what client acceptance is like. Now the challenge is that it's like, how much of this is successful because I built it, and how much is successful because I'm sitting behind this huge brand, but it's still a phenomenal experience. And you can kind of push and ask questions and kind of understand, okay, hey, if I didn't work at this big old logo and this partner wasn't sitting behind me, would this client still say yes? We got to see. But it's still a phenomenal experience to have. So that's really dope. Yeah. That's dope that you were able to do that, right? You're not going into the market cold turkey or just kind of blind, because you come in these spaces. And yeah, you're right. Like I had a financial cushion, but there's also, I think also like what you're describing is also like a technical cushion, right? If you're able to go into entrepreneurship with this wealth of experience and proven track record that you have done, hey, I know, even though I'm doing it on my own, I know I can do this because I did it over here. I just happen to be doing it for myself right now, but I'm still doing it. Let's continue forward though, because we're going to keep on, honestly, I can already tell you, we're going to cut this at a reasonable time so we can do a part 2, because I want to talk to you about, because Reframe, I know that it was restructured as a holding company and y'all have AI tech and consulting offerings.
Yes, services and software.
I want to talk about this Say it one more time.
Services and software. We started out as a service company.
Services software.
And then we built software to help scale the experience design that we were providing on the service side.
Yeah. So it's interesting because, again, man, we definitely got to connect just on the, like, we just got to talk. We've been talking on the phone this whole time to coordinate this interview, but we got to like talk for real. It's just so eerily, like some of these things are just so eerily similar. So as it pertains to just where we are, you talked about Sam Altman earlier, like this AI space, right? Now, look, I'm going to go ahead and jump out there. I ain't trying to tease it, right? Okay, you can disagree, we can just have the conversation.
Yeah.
I really think, let me back up and say something. Mm-hmm. And this is Real Talk Tuesday. I'm going to just say it, okay? As I look at the tech space, 99% of the things that come out of tech, white tech bro culture, is vaporware.
Yeah, FOMO. Yeah.
Right. That's my stance.
Like,
I'm not. Now there's some code. There's code and there's little pieces of things that are real, right? But the things that come out that are marketed as X are very rarely, from what I see, X. It's typically like, oh, this has value, but not at the scale or the way that you say.
Right.
And so I've experienced that directly working in tech for a huge virtual online survey company. Yeah. I've also seen it in consulting.
Yeah.
But I would say that this AI space is a really the latest example, right? So I believe that generative AI has value. Yeah. I believe that it's real. Right. But I think what happens in the tech space is folks who are in the know, who understand the tech, have an advantage because people will often see some technology, and because the general public doesn't understand technology, they then project a bunch of assumptions about what the tech actually is. So, like, generative AI is not Jarvis in the Iron Man suit. Right. Generative AI is not whatever the virus is in Terminator that killed everybody. Generative AI is a bunch of math that is based against predictions and assumptions of various inputs, like stacked on top of each other tens of thousands of hundreds of millions of times, right? But my challenge is that when you look at AI, right, so often it's not presented like that, Jeffrey. It's presented as this end-all solution that's going to think for you and like ideate and do things that human beings do. And so, like, I'm curious as to your posture and position on the real function of AI, especially, and also I'll say, my bad, last thing is, I think, like, if it wasn't Goldman Sachs, it was some other like analyst report that came out recently that said, look, AI is expensive. It doesn't solve complex problems. And it has serviceability, but like in very clear, just concrete context, but the bubble's going to be here for a while. So we're going to go ahead and invest in it. Right. I'm curious as to your stance on this tech. AI has been around for a while, but this generative AI is, like, of course, just taking the world by storm. Where do you stand on it?
So, you asked a loaded question with a lot of subheads. So, I want to go back to a point that I think is really important to have on film. And that is the ability to tell a story that is future forward and gives people the ability to imagine. And the reason I wanted to come back to this is because I think for a lot of Black, and I'm going to be very specific, Black tech founders, the way that we're taught, and it's generational, in our homes as around narrative and storytelling, oftentimes is based on truth. And because of that, oftentimes there's fear associated with reality that we are oftentimes asked to tell stories. Now, why is that good for context? When I went out, so me and a bunch of people started Blacks in Tech at South by Southwest during the early years. And I got to see a lot of the foundational things in terms of how social media was being marketed, right? Very similar. And so a lot of times, from my experience, I can't speak for others, being on the doorstep of what was forming Tech 2.0, and you did have the bubble in 2000. Social media did reinvigorate the technology ecosystem in terms of, going beyond email, going beyond the internet in terms of, the early stages of search, which you had a pretend entry point through this thing called AOL, when you actually could go directly on the internet, which again buys into the narrative of a lot of smoke and mirrors. Now, the reason that I wanted to bring that up is because flash forward, 2015, starting Reframe, leaving Ogilvy, nice pad. Verizon was my first customer. Wyndham Prudential United, based on my background, and then made the pivot and said, how do I want to scale my business? Tech. I'm not going to paint pretty pictures and go into the creative space. I'm going to do it, scale it through software. I'm going to design a framework that's assess, which asks questions. And then I'm going to be able to cluster your responses based on your attitudes and behaviors, which creates segments. And then I'm going to treat those attitudes and behaviors by first building an algorithm that drives predicted outcome. So it automates everything that I was doing in a human one-to-one basis, right? That's the framework. And so when I went out, joined an accelerator, I noticed these white boys could tell these stories that were based on a 10-page deck. And there's no there. And then they go out and they raise $2 million. I'm like, where's the P&L? I don't understand. I actually have a business. And so oftentimes It was hard for me to do what I consider lying. They called it FOMO. Okay? the pro formas was bananas. You got to build $100 million in 5 years? That doesn't seem real to me. Right? And so what I had to realize, there was a shift happening in terms of narrative forming, because there had been so much wealth created in the early stages of, let's say, Web 1.0, that it created these cottage industries where people now could take all that money and make bets and form these things called venture capitalists, move away from Silicon Valley. They go to New York, they go to Chicago, and now everybody's running down to Miami, right? But that's what I meant by that generation of, I don't want to call them kids, but there's a generation that grew up learning how to tell stories about the future to create FOMO, because they had to subsidize their business model. And so that's why you and I may look at it as that's crazy. But to this newly formed industry, every pitch comes in like that. And so for us, part of it is we got to learn how to tell better stories, right? And now look, we could talk all day, all night about, the shortage of capital that goes to Black and brown and women founders. But I will say there's a deficit in terms of how we tell our stories, because you're walking right to the edge of almost lying, right? Fraud in some cases, right?
It feels like that, Jeffrey, right? And I'm gonna be honest, it is like that, right? Man,
and then
you, I've seen so many.
Then they lose money.
Yeah,
and then the investors say, "Well, we believe in founders that have like done it twice, multiple." Well, that's when ageism sets in, right? In order to do that, you think about you have a 10-year runway, you have to be less than 30, so you can come out and try and recoup the money, pay your investors back for the money that they lost. So there's a gamification of this of the system. It ain't fair. It's not. But it is what it is. And so where I land is that at the end of the day, a business has revenue minus operating expenses gives you a margin, right? Now, that doesn't mean that I'm going to go out and create the next unicorn. But what I will say to founders and investors, now you got a generation of people of color that have done well in terms of wealth, but you still have a significant deficit in terms of Black and brown households where net worth is below zero. So I say to a lot of the founders that do get funded, don't waste this opportunity. Instead of 100 million, maybe it's a 50 million, right? And so you can't buy into the idea of you're going to blitz scale, which a lot of people may or may not know of. Like you try the approach of blitz scaling your business when you really haven't validated whether or not you have a customers or a significant customer base. And so you burn through $2 million where more than 90% of small businesses make less than $1 million. So understand your privilege as a Black and brown founder that does get funded. Understand the people that come behind you. And I know, you still got to carry the weight of others. You got to go backwards before you go forward. Yeah, I get that. But don't waste the opportunity, bro. Insist, treat that $1 million, $2 million. You don't burn through it at a runway where 12 to 24 months you're out of business. We don't get those other opportunities. Well, so that's the only thing I'll say to that. We have to learn how to tell better stories. That's the game. And think about you from an asset class. Should you choose to pursue venture funding, it is a dream. Now, you can come down and focus on, go buy a business too, which I encourage a lot of people to do. Like when you come out of corporate, I wish somebody would have educated me more about buying a business, like buying real estate, right? And so that's the thing I think we have to have in more of these conversations is the portfolio of types of businesses that you can go buy, you can come together as a collective, but everybody doesn't have to be a startup. People have been creating business since America came over, right? Cotton, like that. Mm-hmm. Hey, we're a direct product. And so I say to a lot of people, like, don't get caught up in the dream of a startup. Go create a business of value that you can deliver. And yes, they don't always invest in services, but maybe that's your starting point. For us, we're 100% bootstrapped. Our services paid for our software build. We built our own software based on the services. We toggle back and forth. And so, failure is not someone from a venture capitalist firm telling you that your business is not investable. Failure is you believing that bullshit and then going out and stopping and creating and building value within your community. That's failure.
Man, first of all, you spit mad bars, and like, it's funny. We had on like the CEO and founder of Chezi, Toby Egbuna, on earlier this season, and we were just talking about like Black folks in the VC space, and so like we're 100% bootstrapped as well. We don't have any angels. We don't have so like we're bootstrapped as well. But Toby went, he went the other way, right? He's done different rounds and things of that nature. But we talked about was like, it's so interesting because I think VC sells this dream of like, okay, get your company up, be a unicorn, exit at 9 figures, and whatever. I think the truth of the matter is a lot of people, not just black and brown folks, but certainly black and brown folks, would be better served to say, hey, as opposed to making a company that you're constantly trying to get rounds for, to your point, create something that has value, that has an address, that engages an addressable need, and that can create impact in the world. And that might mean that you don't make $20 million a year, Jeffrey. Maybe you make, after taxes, a few $100 bands.
Yeah.
But guess what?
Sure.
You're making a few $100,000, right? And I've had that conversation with people where I'm like, look, man, Living Corporate is bootstrap. For me, we walk away every year. If we walk away every year, I walk away, Jeffrey, with like $300,000-$400,000 in my pocket. Jeffrey, that's a good life, brother. I don't need to have a private jet or like 3 or 4 Lamborghinis. I got my little properties. I'm good. But I think we're in this space, and I think it's really dangerous now, especially when you look at the market and the cost of, these interest rates are so ridiculous. I mean, I'm seeing people sell their company or sell 12% of their company for like $10,000. It's like crazy. It's just not equitable. Right. And so, I believe that, I agree. Like there's a precious few of us that are able to even get that funding. And it is important that if you get it to move wisely with it. Because you're right. We don't get to make the same mistakes. Speaking of which, it reminds me of your man who's actually at Black Tech Week this week, the person who created Movie Pass. Did you watch that documentary?
No, but I do know one of the founders, and not going to say I lived it with him, but was close enough to where heard a lot of the stories as they were happening in real time.
In real time? Oh, that's tough.
Well,
because the documentary was terrible.
Yeah. It's what I'll say. And we may disagree about this, right?
Give it to me. Give it to me.
I'm of the belief that there's huge inequities because of the history in terms of how the country is formed as it relates to race and class, right? Not ever going to discount that. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm also a belief if I create that value, I get to make choices and bets on however I want. And yes, U.S. government has played a huge role in terms of the infrastructure and build of the internet as an infrastructure in itself, technology. Now, a lot of people will say, a la Elon Musk, that I built this on my own, right? And everyone knows. Now, when it comes to the venture capitalist space, you're opting in to seek money from them, right? And so sometimes what I am not of the belief is pointing a finger at them, right? Given the history, come on, it's never going to be fair. Now, what I do point the finger at is when we inside our own communities go out and replicate the exact same thing, sense of exclusion.
1,000%.
Because they went to school with those same people that they're saying are excluding. And then we create a subcategory that reflects the same system that we're saying is not advantageous to us, right? And so that, to me...
Why would you think I would disagree with that?
No, not that. But I'm saying in terms of the venture capitalists, there's a lot of finger pointing in terms of how much they do invest in our communities, right?
Sure.
I would say we got to build our own at some point, right?
Oh, yeah.
And I'm not saying you would disagree with
Jeffrey,
that.
listen.
I'm not saying that. But
okay.
No, that I'm not saying. I could just, the energy, the vibration, like, I know you're not that dude, right? But I do think that we keep going back to the same well. No one's going to save us.
Yeah.
Right?
Nah.
No one's going to save us.
Nah.
But we can't create another barrier that reflects the same system. And that happens a lot when it comes to people that look like us, right?
Jeff, dog, man, you got me. Yes, man. So, like, it's crazy because it's crazy. So a couple things. First off, it's like, I've had this conversation with people in private, and it sounds like it can sound really harsh, but I'm like, hey, if you have a business idea that you can't get off the ground without you needing like $500,000 from whatever, then you need to go back to the drawing board and figure out what does it look like to start that idea with $2,000, right? To start that idea with you bootstrapping. And that might mean your roadmap is different, but it's more sustainable. And I get frustrated, right? Because like all these VC stories, and I believe all of them. And look, controversial opinion, I don't really rock with VC as a concept, to be clear. Like the way it exists today, popularly exists, I don't really like. I think it's exploitative. I've yet to see any data. I've yet to actually see any data. And I've anecdotally talked to so many Black founders who've gone the VC route and not actually been happy with the ultimate outcome, right? Irrespective of what like the headlines or whatever may show. So I'm right there with you is, hey, we have to figure out communal, equitable ways to support and lift and build up one another in these communities and stop being mad or surprised. Just say surprised. If you want to be mad, I guess be mad. But when you see like, Black women get 0.012% of all VC capital, Black men get like less than 1% of all VC capital. And it's like, well, yeah, but you're asking people who historically do not care about us, do not understand us, and frankly, historically have exploited and taken our ideas. I mean, if you look at like the history of like just various patents and creations, the things that Black and brown people have created, right? Like what are we talking about, right? And so that sounds really harsh, though, and I'm not trying to victim.
No.
To your point,
but we got to have wider conversations in terms of other types of business and asset classes, and that's where I think because of technology and media, it gets over commercialized in terms of the porn of startup. Okay. Let's call it what it is. Because there are so many other ways. There's debt capital, there's venture capital, there's, going out and forming collective. There is going out, finding a broker to buy a business that may be under, again, because ultimately what you're trying to get to is a business that has value or is distress, so that you can, and then this gets to the other piece, right? What's your exit? Do you want to build a business that's around generations? Or do you want to build a business to sell? And then you get a whole bunch of people that lose their minds because you exited something based on what you built. So I just think we got to begin to have wider conversations as it relates to how you create value and wealth. And I think it's really unfortunate that there's a generation of people that think having a successful business means fundraising versus having customers. right? You're not a business until you got somebody to buy your product or service.
And I talk when we talk about entrepreneur, like in this era, right? It and like so many people, Jeffrey, man, like so many people hit me up on some like, hey, so like, have you done any funding rounds? I'm like, no. Would you like to get into? How can I help you? Could you connect me with like these buyers over here? I like really would like to talk to them. I have something tangible to sell, right? We have analytic services. We have an e-learning platform. We do brand storytelling through our hey, here's some case studies, right? And it's interesting. The timbre of the discussion changes, like truly, like in this, depending on just like the spaces you engage, right? The timbre of the discussion rapidly changes when it's not a discussion anymore about me looking to spend a bunch of time on funding rounds and really me trying to expand my market footprint. There's just different conversations. They're different. It's a different mentality and mindset. And Toby, when we spoke, he agreed. He was like, look, like, he's like, I think people really underestimate how hard it is to build a real business and get customers while also trying to court investors. He's like courting investors, going that VC route is so time consuming. Like you spend so much time trying to get investors that you're not spending that time on getting customers and building your actual business. And so I think that's tough, though. That's a tough thing to hear.
Yeah.
It's an attitude shift that a lot of people have to take on, but I do believe it's sustainable. And that goes back to what I said about, like I'm not selling you, sunseeker dreams, right? You might not be on no yacht, right? But guess what? You're gonna have something that you own, a destiny that you can more directly control, and you still gonna make more bread than you probably would have ever made in corporate America. Still,
yes, and and again, I what I try and do. So with Reframe Inc, next year will be 10 years of being in business. And
congratulations.
Thank you. And I have to remember to celebrate, right? Because you're so involved in the business, whereas as every entrepreneur to strive to be out of the business. That's another topic we have to talk about in terms of building your business to scale. So what I try and do in terms of, what we're doing now, as we head into chapter 3 and 4 of my life and career, is setting up the holding company. And as we bootstrap our services and our software, what's now our back office shared? And then how do we raise capital? Because with software, you can bootstrap it, right? But we're exploring other sources of capital. Venture is there, of course, but debt is also there, as well as hiring a broker to go out and see what's out there for us to potentially buy. And so I just think we just have to have wider conversations because it's capital comes in many shapes and forms. It's just, I think, with the idea of venture, it becomes over glamorized. And look, it may not be for you. And that's the last thing I'll say in terms of the topic, because I know the time and everything. As an entrepreneur, you got to really have a true, honest conversation with yourself in multiple times. And it's continuous. Who am I? What's my mission? What's my vision? Are these the right people around me? Do I have to go out and get new talent to get me where the vision and the mission has to be? And so, when we think about the idea of capital, I just think we have to have honest conversations in terms of if that idea or if that service or if that, product, what's the right capital structure and the vehicle to get you there? Because you're always going to need capital, right? Working capital specifically. It's just making sure that you truly understand in terms of the journey that you're about to go on and the capital structure that you need for that. and it can't just be venture.
You know what? I want to end part one right there because I said, we're going to go over. And I'm going to honor your time, Jeffrey. So, first of all, thank you for being a guest on Living Corporate. I'm excited about this conversation. I appreciate your time. Let's have you back for part two really soon. Okay, bro?
I'm with it. Let's go. All right.
All right, man. Till next time. Peace. Right.
Living Corporate is a podcast by Living Corporate LLC. Our logo was designed by David Dawkins. Our theme music was produced by Ken Brown. Additional music production by Antoine Franklin for Musical Elevation. Post-production is handled by Jeremy Jackson. Got a topic suggestion? Email us at livingcorporatepodcast@gmail.com. You can find us online on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and living-corporate.com. Thanks for listening. Stay tuned.